My name is Ryan Carter, and I'm
I'm
a
physically
35-year-old marketing manager at a leading IT firm in San Francisco. My career was flourishing, and my life felt complete. At least, that's what I thought. But there was one thing that always weighed on me: my mother's persistent concern about my love life. Sunday brunch with her had become a tradition, and on this particular day, we met at our usual cafe. "Ryan, have you met anyone special lately?" she asked, her tone filled with hope. I sighed internally. Here we go again. "Mom, I'm perfectly happy with how things are right now." She hesitated before responding. "I just want you to have a loving marriage like your father and I do." I understood where she was coming from. My parents had been married for 45 years, their relationship something to admire. But for me, getting married wasn't my priority. I wasn't willing to risk my career just to fit into societal expectations. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm sure the right person will come into my life when the time is right." I gave her a reassuring smile, unaware that my words were about to come true much sooner than I ever imagined. Roughly a year ago, I had an encounter that would turn my world upside down. On my usual commute to the office, I nearly spilled my coffee while stepping into the elevator. "Careful there," a calm voice said as someone reached out, steadying my cup. "Thanks," I replied, looking up to see a well-dressed man in his early 50s. "I'm Daniel Pierce, the new vice president." He introduced himself with a warm smile. That afternoon, Daniel and I discussed an upcoming project. His sharp insights and extensive experience aligned seamlessly with my innovative approach, and together we crafted an impressive proposal. From that day on, we frequently crossed paths at work. He was always respectful, composed, and genuinely interested in my ideas. Before I knew it, I found myself drawn to his presence. 6 months after our first meeting, Daniel invited me to an upscale restaurant for dinner. The atmosphere was intimate, the candlelight casting soft shadows between us. "Ryan, since I met you, my life has felt brighter," he said, his expression serious. "Will you marry me?" His words took my breath away. A mix of emotions swirled inside me, but they quickly settled into overwhelming joy. "Yes, I'd love to," I answered, my voice trembling with happiness. That night, I could barely contain my excitement as I called my mother. "Mom, I'm engaged." Her voice burst with excitement through the phone. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. What's he like?" "You'll love him. He's kind, respectful, and everything I could have hoped for." When my mother finally met Daniel, she took to him immediately. "He's a wonderful man. I can see that he'll make you very happy," she said, fully supporting our engagement. The wedding preparations went smoothly, and in what felt like no time, 6 months flew by. Before I knew it, our wedding day had arrived. The morning was a whirlwind: hair, makeup, and slipping into my wedding dress. Standing before the mirror, I took in the sight of myself draped in white. My heart pounded with excitement. "You look absolutely stunning," my mother said as she stepped into the room, tears in her eyes. "Mom, I'm so happy," I whispered, feeling my own emotions rising. "Daniel is a good man. He'll cherish you," she reassured me with a gentle smile. Taking a deep breath, I made my way to the church. My father stood by the grand doors, waiting. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked softly. I nodded, looping my arm through his as the doors swung open. The sound of the organ filled the air as I stepped forward. The gazes of the guests followed my path down the aisle, but I only had eyes for Daniel, standing at the altar. As we stood before the priest, the ceremony began. I felt sure, certain that with Daniel by my side, we could overcome anything and build a happy future together. Then, just as Daniel began to speak his vows, "I, Daniel Pierce, take Ryan Carter to be my—" The priest suddenly cleared his throat, pausing the ceremony. A silence fell over the church. Confused, I tried to refocus on Daniel's words, but before he could continue, the priest leaned in close to me and whispered, "Stop this wedding." His words struck like a lightning bolt. "What?" I barely managed to keep my voice down, covering my mouth in shock. The priest's expression was deadly serious. This wasn't some joke. "If you go through with this, you'll regret it. There's something you need to know about your husband." A cold wave of dread washed over me. Daniel's secret? What was he talking about? My mind reeled, but with so many eyes on me, I forced myself to stay composed. "Ryan, are you all right?" Daniel asked softly. "Yes, I'm fine," I managed, though my face felt stiff as I tried to smile. The priest's words rang in my ears. "Be true to yourself." But in that moment, I didn't know what was right. I took a deep breath and decided I had to go through with the ceremony. "I, Ryan Carter." My voice trembled as I spoke my vows, my heart a storm of uncertainty. Somehow, the ceremony ended, and I walked down the aisle with Daniel amid the applause of our guests. Though I tried to keep up appearances, unease twisted in my gut. Before heading to the reception, I needed a moment to clear my head. "I need to rest for a bit in the preparation room," I told Daniel, slipping away alone. As I walked down the hallway, the priest appeared once more. "Ryan, go to the preparation room. Everything you need to know is in there." His urgency made my stomach tighten, but I nodded. Arriving at the room, I hesitated before opening the door, my hand shaking slightly. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. But then, a notebook sitting on the table caught my eye. My heart pounded as I stepped closer. Daniel's name was written on the cover. My fingers hovered over it. Something told me that opening this notebook would change everything. A wave of fear washed over me, but I knew I had to see the truth. Steeling myself, I picked it up, hands trembling as I flipped it open. The words on the first page made my blood run cold. "I have 3 wives and 7 children." My hand shook so violently that I nearly dropped the notebook. My breath hitched. Was this a joke? A draft for a novel? Desperately, I looked for an explanation, but the next line crushed any hope I had. "After marrying a new wife and securing her assets, eliminate her immediately." A sharp chill raced down my spine. Daniel, my husband, was planning to kill me. I muttered, "No, this can't be real. This has to be some mistake." But as I flipped through the pages, the evidence piled up. Detailed profiles of past wives, their assets, the methods of transferring their wealth, and how they were disposed of. Then I saw my own name. Ryan Carter, IT company executive. Estimated assets, $5 million. Full transfer within 6 months of marriage. I couldn't turn the page. My legs gave out, and I slumped against the wall, my body trembling uncontrollably. I needed help. Gripping my phone with shaking hands, I called my mother. "Mom, something terrible has happened," I choked out. There was silence, then a deep sigh. "Ryan, listen to me carefully. When I was young, I almost married a man like this." "What?" My breath caught. "Yes, but I realized it just in time. That's how I met your father." Her voice was calm but firm. "Listen to me, sweetheart. Get divorce papers and leave, now. But there's still the reception. People are waiting. I don't care about the reception. Your safety is all that matters." Her words gave me the push I needed. "Thank you, Mom." I'm leaving now. Slipping the notebook into my bag, I took a deep breath and slipped out through the back door of the reception hall, flagging down a taxi. The driver glanced at me in my wedding dress but said nothing. At City Hall, as I held the divorce papers in my hands, the weight of reality hit me. But I remembered Daniel's words from the notebook. Without hesitation, I started filling them out. I wasn't just walking away from a marriage, I was running for my life. Once Eleanor determined that we had gathered enough solid evidence, she suggested we take it to the police. My stomach twisted with nerves as we made our way to the station. There, we were assigned to Detective Robert Hayes, a seasoned officer in his mid-50s. Inside his office, we laid out everything we had: copies of Daniel's notebook, records of his offshore accounts, and statements from his past victims. Detective Hayes examined the materials in silence, his expression unreadable. "You spoke with the victims personally?" he finally asked, his tone sharp. "Yes, I did," I confirmed. He exhaled through his nose, his brows furrowing. "That was risky. If the suspect realized what you were doing, your life could have been in serious danger." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I hadn't considered just how much I had put myself at risk. Detective Hayes leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "With this evidence alone, I can't get an immediate arrest warrant," he admitted. "But it's enough to launch an official investigation." It wasn't the definitive action I had hoped for, but it was a start. Over the next week, we waited anxiously for the police to make their move. I spent my days feeling restless, checking in with Eleanor frequently, but there were no major updates. Then, one night, after coming home late from work, I found an envelope in my mailbox. There was no return address. Heart pounding, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting. "If you expose my secret, I'll make sure your family pays the price." The blood drained from my face. He knew. He knew I had been working against him. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and called my mother. "Mom, are you okay? Has anything strange happened?" My voice shook as I waited for her answer. "Honey, I'm fine," she replied, confused. "Why? What's going on? You sound terrified." Hearing her voice gave me the slightest relief, but the fear still gripped me like a vice. "Can you come over? I need to talk to you in person." After reading Daniel's threat, my mind was in turmoil. Doubts crept in. Was it worth continuing the investigation if it put my family in danger? When I confided in Eleanor, she chose her words carefully. "Ryan, I understand your fear, but backing down is exactly what he wants. If you give in, he'll know he can control you." Logically, I knew she was right, but my heart struggled to accept it. I need time to think." I told her. I'd put the investigation on hold. Every day after, I was plagued with guilt. I couldn't focus at work, I barely slept, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder. One afternoon, as I sat on a park bench listening to the wind rustle through the trees, I tried to untangle the war inside my head. I thought about all the victims I had met, all the evidence we had gathered. Could I really just walk away and let Daniel continue hurting more people? A few days after I put everything on pause, I got an unexpected visitor. When I opened my front door, my breath caught. It was the priest from my wedding. "I need to speak with you," he said quietly. I stepped aside and led him into my living room. Once we sat down, he let out a heavy sigh before meeting my gaze. "Ryan, I have a personal connection to Daniel," he admitted. My entire body went rigid. He took a deep breath. "I am the brother of Daniel's first wife." My pulse pounded in my ears. I barely managed to whisper, "What?" "My sister married Daniel nearly 20 years ago." The priest's face darkened with sorrow. "At first, she thought she had found the perfect man. But within 6 months, she saw his true nature." His voice wavered as tears glistened in his eyes. "He drained her of everything: her money, her spirit, her will to live." He swallowed hard before continuing. "And then, one day, she was gone." His words struck me like a blow to the chest. I felt sick. You think Daniel had something to do with it? I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer. The priest nodded solemnly. I am certain of it, but at the time I had no evidence. He clenched his fists. That's why I tried to warn you at the wedding. I couldn't stand by and let another person suffer like my sister did. His voice cracked with emotion. Ryan, you have the power to expose him, to stop him once and for all. Please don't give up. A fire lit inside me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. If we didn't stop Daniel, more lives would be ruined. I owed it to his past victims. I owed it to myself. That night, standing in my apartment, I looked out over the city lights, my mind replaying everything that had led to this moment. I couldn't run anymore. I wouldn't run anymore. The next morning, I walked into Eleanor's office, my spine straight, my decision made. She looked up from her paperwork. Good morning, Ryan. Did you get any sleep? Surprisingly, yes, I replied with a small smile. What's our next move? Eleanor studied me for a moment, then nodded. We're ready to submit everything to the police. But before that, she hesitated. I want to reach out to Daniel's other victims again. I understood her hesitation. Asking them to relive their trauma wasn't easy. But I knew what had to be done. I'll talk to them personally. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And I was ready to fight. From that day on, I worked tirelessly to reconnect with Daniel's former wives. I revisited Sabrina and told her about our progress. Sabrina, thanks to your courage, we've made it this far, I said. Tears welled up in her eyes. Do you think we can really stop him? Yes, I said firmly. But we need you to stand with us one more time. She took a deep breath, then nodded. I will. We tracked down more of Daniel's ex-wives. Many were hesitant at first, but when they saw our sincerity, they agreed to help. At the same time, we pressed forward with law enforcement, providing Detective Hayes with everything we had. This might be enough to get a warrant, he muttered, flipping through our evidence. As we uncovered more of Daniel's financial transactions and patterns, the full scope of his crimes became clearer. The tension was suffocating, but for the first time, I felt like we were truly making progress. Then, finally, it happened. Daniel was arrested. The trial began shortly after. Walking into the courtroom, my stomach twisted into knots as I saw him sitting there. When our eyes met, his expression hardened, hatred burning behind his gaze. The trial stretched on for weeks as victims testified, evidence was presented, and the horrifying depth of his crimes was laid bare. The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with shock and anger. On the final day, I held my breath as the judge delivered the verdict. The defendant, Daniel Pierce, is found guilty on all counts, including fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. A collective murmur rippled through the room. Then, the sentence came, 20 years in prison. The air rushed from my lungs as a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying lifted from my shoulders. As Daniel was led away, a mix of emotions churned inside me, relief, sadness, even a sliver of pity. But above all, I felt free. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to normal. One afternoon, I met with Sabrina at a cafe. You look happier, I told her with a smile. She nodded. Thanks to you, I've started a new life. That's your own strength, I said. She shook her head. No, because you had the courage to fight, we could too. Sabrina then hesitated before saying, some of us are starting a support group. Would you like to join? I answered without hesitation. I'd love to. That day, I realized something. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning.